All right, welcome everyone. So nice to have you joining us. Folks are coming into the call, so we'll get started here pretty quick. Very eager to share with you John Ruffin and Jill Schnipke's conversation today about generative leadership, the new requirement for leading through complexity and crisis. So if you're just joining us, thank you so much for taking time to be with us today over your lunch hour. We hope you are having an opportunity to check out our Leading in a Crisis Summit and the other speakers. And just to get started pretty quick, I see most of us are in the call now, so we're going to get started. Hello, John. Hello, Jill.
Hi, Anissa. Great to
Good
be
morning.
here.
Good morning. So nice to have you. So we have a lot to cover today. Generative leadership. I didn't know what this was, you guys, so I had to look it up. And what I learned is that this is a really cool, progressive way to produce, we'll just call it reliable leadership skills. So that's pretty exciting. Thank you, everyone. I want to get started and I want to introduce our sponsors today, that without which our Leading in a Crisis Summit would not be possible. First, I want to say thank you to David Whitmarsh and his team at the Whitmarsh Consulting Group. The Whitmarsh Consulting Group specializes in HR, information technology consulting, and multi-channel marketing strategy. So do reach out if David and his team may be supportive of you. They have lots of specials going on specifically for this time of the crisis, so don't hesitate to reach out. The other thing I'd like to say is thank you to our sponsor, Insperity. Insperity is HR that makes a difference. And I reached out to Insperity and I said, will you sponsor us? And gosh, I don't mean to over ask, but would you kindly put together something that we can give to our participants that has a lot of value? And they said, oh, sure. How about a free financial analysis report and debrief? And I thought, okay, but what is that? Well, first, we know that not everyone on the call is a good fit for Insperity services. So then when I found out that this is going to take our business performance advisor over at Insperity anywhere between 3 and 10 hours to support you in this HR budget analysis, and that the whole reason that they're doing this is because here it is, 2020, major pandemic upheaval, economic craziness that like we've never seen before. We know that HR departments' budgets are out the window. And they said if we can support any business in realigning with clarity, then we've done our part. So don't hesitate to reach out to them and take advantage of that. It's TurnKeyCoachingSolutions.net HR report, and that HRR is case sensitive. Finally, TurnKey is also one of the sponsors here, TurnKey Coaching Solutions. And one of the things that we're doing is we've put together relevant packages to serve our clients and peers. And unfortunately, that means for many folks some outplacement services, for example. Our outplacement programs are affordable, scalable for executive all the way down to the front line. In fact, we even have a name your own price package for organizations. So do reach out if we may be of service and assistance. My name is Anissa Avon, and I am the CEO of TurnKey Coaching and Development Solutions. Founded TurnKey in 2004, and then we had a bit of a reorg in 2013. And where we've landed is we've become a leading provider of enterprise learning and development solutions. We have experts like John and Jill in every major metropolitan area in the US and in key hubs globally. And I reached out to my team, and at that fateful week in March, we all remember that day when we heard it's time for lockdown, and hold on to your hats. We don't know how long this is going to go. And I said, what do we do? And how do we serve? And within minutes of reaching out to John and Jill and some other experts, we had over 40 speakers on the books that are providing their expertise in this time of need. Do check back to our virtual summit portal, TurnKeyCoachingSolutions.net/leading leading in a crisis. And let us know what talks, what experts have we not got on the roster yet. I will reach out. I will find the talk that is going to support you. And so I look forward to hearing from you. So John Ruffin and Jill Schnipke. So I first want to introduce John and talk about just what a consummate professional and with deep experience around organizational development, including leading major strategy projects and culture change projects. And his specialty is in C-suite and executive level coaching and executive team development. He has worked with founders moving through transitions all the way to the front line development. He's consulted at the highest levels in both public and private sectors, including federal government agencies and Fortune 500. And Jill and John work together to create this amazing magic that clients love. And Jill brings 18 years of experience coaching teams on performance and organizational effectiveness. One of the things that I love about how Jill describes her work with corporate executives and cross-functional teams is how she brings a bit of positive energy, direction, and systemization to help organizations transform their herd of cats into functional collaborative leaders. So I just want to say thank you guys for joining us. Tell us, what did I miss and what are we going to learn today?
Well, Anissa, I'll just start off. It's such a great pleasure to do this with you. Thank you for all of your superb organization. We're looking forward to this. We've got a lot of material that we want to compress, and it's giving you really a good taste of what generative leadership is about. It is a new subject and topic that is perfect for these times. And so we've got a lot of information. We hope we're going to have a little fun doing this. That's one of the premise of how Jill and I work, is if there's not some fun in it, sorry, we're not doing it. So any event.
Boy, can I appreciate that right now.
I'll turn it over to Jill. We're going to hit the ball back and forth. And if I get off track, Jill will correct me. And so that's the way we work.
Perfect. And I know you want to share your screen because you've got some good slides for us to follow along.
Okay. So, let's get
by the way, I wanted to let everyone know that John and Jill are in Colorado, and there's a bit of a blizzard happening. So they both have backup plans to join us if, in fact, something interrupts them, like, I don't know, a snowstorm in April. Gosh.
So I'm just going to start off and have Jill cover our session objectives.
Yep. Yeah, thank you, Anissa. It was quite interesting to wake up to a covering of white outside. So today, I'm just going to start with, we're going to give you an overview of what generative leadership can do for you, what it looks like, how to use it. John is actually working on a PhD, and he's pretty humble about that, but he knows this stuff inside and out. And so today I just want to let people know this is an overview. It's this is the beginner level. There's a lot of nuance, and hopefully we can get you set up with understanding that this is a new perspective. It's a new way to see leadership and leading. So today we just really want to distinguish for you the difference between generative leadership and traditional leadership, or what some call visionary leadership. We really want you to get, there's a process to making this work. We're going to give you a head start in a really practical way. And there's some really cool ways to kind of jumpstart the process. And we're going to give you some of those questions to inspire that for you.
Yeah, and I might just say, by the way, if you see me having a sip, this is iced tea.
Right, John. We know liquor sales are up.
Good old bourbon. So I just want to let everybody say, "Oh my God, he's drinking on." So this methodology is the product of some good friends of mine. As a matter of fact, Jervis Bush and Bob Marshak, who are heroes in the world of organization development, and now in a theory called dialogic organization development. And so they've been working. Gervais is in the Simon Fraser University in Vancouver. Bob Marshak's at American University in Washington. But I just want to give them credit for the really formative work. This will be an adaptation of a lot of their work, but we're so grateful to what they have brought to this scene. So the next area and is the distinctions of generative leadership. Jill, back to you, I think.
Yeah, so what folks typically call traditional leadership, it resides a whole lot on vision, using vision and a top-down approach to solve problems that are pretty easy to target, and we know right where they are and what they are. It's very much hierarchical, and the boss is the leader. Typically, the boss is the one that has the answers to the problems that we're solving. And it's obviously very widely used. This is, military, corporate America, nonprofits. It's really useful leadership. And it has some limitations. So in times like these, when the boss may not have the answers, when the problems are really complex, they're not easy to target and just swap out a piece or a part, this is where generative leadership can come in. During these volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous times with, oh, by the way, a whole bunch of instability and unpredictability.
I'm assuming most people know this term VUCA, but it's where we're living these days, folks. And also we've added one other, the I is instability.
Yes. Yes. And so who this is for, I'm going to just give you a little bit about who this is for. This is for leaders who are open to trying something new as they see the limitations of the traditional or visionary leadership model. This is for leaders who know and trust their people, who regularly engage their people in solving problems, who regularly leverage the strength and ingenuity of their workforce. It is for everyone, and it might be more difficult for people who are not necessarily used to doing those things I just mentioned. It might be more difficult for people who are very technically proficient and have moved up through the ranks due to their technical expertise, or people who have a more command and control style of leadership, a very hierarchical way of leading. And again, there's limitations where this can be useful for everyone. And we're here to give you that beginning foundation to be able to use it. So I just want to say too, like what this leadership, generative leadership is not. It's not your traditional command and control. I think that's probably obvious by now. It's not opening up the traditional leadership style to include brainstorming or town halls. It's not bringing in employee engagement. It's definitely not task forces and focus groups. But what it is a new perspective, a new way of thinking. And it's sort of an emergent, you're at an emergent edge generating new thoughts. And that seems really simple, but it's really quite nuanced. So this is not an off-the-shelf method. It is a way of engaging with people that can produce new insights from the collective.
And so the typical comment from a visionary leader and traditional leader, which is very appropriate in many cases, is, I got this, stick with me, I know the answer. The generative leader, in terms of dealing with this complexity, is saying, you know what, I think I know the challenge and I think we know the challenge, but I'll admit that I need all of you to help decide what to do about it. And that's the real courageous piece in this difference. In many cases, it's easy to say, I got the answer, just follow me. It takes a different mindset, and we'll talk about that too, how to say, I really need your best thinking. So here's a comparison of the two different dimensions. And this is not an either or. This is how we think of as a both and. And this is adding another toolkit to our leadership repertoire, if you will. Complicated problems usually demand technical solutions, but complex problems, on the other side, really need adaptive solutions. The complicated problems are the ones that we're faced with every day, and how to deal with them. Easy to define operationally, lend themselves to solutions, can be solved by experts, and may just require a few changes, can be implemented, that sort of thing. That's the visionary path. The complex and adaptive area, which demands a generative mindset, it's sometimes hard to know what the problem is. And think of the difference between a maze and a whiteout. We can find our way through a maze, not easy, it's complicated. A whiteout is like, what? Where do we go? So in many cases, what we're facing right now in this coronavirus world is a whiteout. And from so many organizations and managers and leaders is, how do we even figure out what our problem is going forward? It requires changes in beliefs, mindsets. The key thing is stakeholders must be involved in problem solving, or in the solution, and involved in some very deep ways. And that's what we'll get. Again, Jill mentioned, it's not just facilitating a town hall and getting some input. It's a major investment and an adaptation. And so just want to give those two pictures. Again, not either or, it's a both and we're adding something that is really relevant right now in this crisis situation.
You know, guys, one of the things that when I was preparing for our conversation, because I wasn't familiar with generative leadership, was the enthusiasm that I felt for the definition of generative leadership and how appropriate it is exactly for this time in a crisis. And your visual here is helping me understand, even if a leader believes that they are adaptable and that they're great at listening to their folks and to fostering innovation and creativity and solutions from their team, if they don't also adapt these other items that you've identified here, if they don't also understand the changes that are required in their team's beliefs, their employees' beliefs and mindsets, if they don't also understand that it's not just about fostering stakeholder ideas, but helping them get skin in the game. And I think that's what you're talking about here, is a systemized approach versus a theoretical approach. Am I getting that?
Absolutely. And it's skin in the game, and it's trusting the skin in the game. You know, a lot of the times with employee engagement, for instance, it'll be, hey, we want to kind of get the feedback from the group, and what do you guys think? And let us know, and we'll let you know what we do with it. This is, hey, we want your ideas, but we want you involved in creating the solutions, the innovations. We need that. And it's not facilitated. We're holding, if you will, a space for that to happen. Yep. So it's a real step and a deeper dive into really mining the resources that we all have, and we typically don't do it as well.
Yeah. The right column can literally be used as a checklist.
Right. I'll go back.
If you want to be a good leader, a great leader in this complicated crisis, making sure that a leader is hitting every single one of those on the right is important.
Mm-hmm. And this, we're giving you, Jill and I, this is a drive-by.
Yeah.
So this is some really deep theory and practice that there are books being written on this. So we're giving you a drive-by. You know, it's one of those things where in the Army we used to say, you give you 2 hours of hand-to-hand combat training. Well, you probably need more. We're here for that, but we also want to introduce it so you begin thinking in this way.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So what? Jill, so what? Why is this important?
Well, I think what Anissa just pointed to is really the key. It's the world looks different, and if you are not changing the mindset of your people and aligning yourself to the values that matter right now, you're going to be left behind. And so to me, it's this is where we all are. We're adapting our entire culture. So the culture of every business and every team is going to have to also evolve.
And so so what? I mean, I think of one of my heroes, Yogi Berra. He's a great baseball player and philosopher. And many may know, his comment, which is probably 40, 50 years old, the future ain't what it used to be. How could he have known? I mean, how right is that for the moment? We have no idea what the future is. It's certainly not what we thought it was going to be. And so moving, with that in mind, how do we function? Jill, I think you're on the rest of this.
I think it's just pretty obvious. We all see that what we've been doing up until now, the old normal, is no longer working. Everybody can see all the places where the old ways of doing things no longer work. And I think some people are starting to engage with the question of, well, maybe we're not even going back to normal. And if we're not going back to normal, that's the moment for generative leadership. What's the new normal? What are we going to do now? Who are we going to become now?
And we're faced with the history of visionary and traditional leadership, and those tools are not applicable. So much of that is what do we do next? How do we do it? What's the progression? And we don't have that kind of framework to rely on at this point. So the new framework is, how do we look at complexity in a complex way of leading as well? And we don't want to make this too mysterious, but it is just shifting our focus and our mental framework. And so this whole notion of the foundations.
Yeah, so I'll take this one. So we've talked a lot about shifting the mindset, and one of the key mindsets that we want to bring to the table here is a mindset that values thinking together. So I think we're seeing this a lot already, where the leaders are like, wow, oh my gosh, I don't know what to do. And the teams are starting to come together in ways where they can make sense of what's happening together. I'm going to save this comment for later, actually. So starting to think together to come up with some new, operational plans in the meantime. Keep on going, John.
Also, it's not, for those of you familiar with appreciative inquiry, it's a social construction. Means words, maybe we're going to say that words make worlds, but it's how do we think as a larger group?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it really takes courage. So to be able to say, wow, okay, I don't know the answer, and I'm just going to set that aside, and as the leader, I'm going to sit with, I don't know what to do, and I can actually open up to this process of thinking together. Additionally, it requires not only that you set that aside, but you're actually willing to invest in the vision of your people. That other people may have really amazing things to bring to the table that you haven't yet tapped. And sometimes that's hard to accept, that maybe we're not making the best use of our people. And it definitely requires patience. So it takes a little bit of time to suss all of this out, right? We've really optimized the way that we work in our teams and what everybody does, and, kind of where the lines are and where the lanes are and where the silos are. Like, it's going to take some patience to delve into that stuff that we don't yet know. So while it may sound simple, it might not be easy in practice. It really comes down to so much of leadership, good leadership these days, is about the being, the quality of being, and how the leader shows up, not necessarily so much about the doing and what the leader does or says.
And just to tag into this, this slide really gives you the fundamentals, if you will, and so much of it really depends on the courageousness of the leader to say, all right, I'm going to put on a new hat. I'm not really sure where this is going to end up, but the investment in the vision of others is more than just asking for some ideas. And patience also has to do with courage. Are you willing to watch it and let it show, let it go and let it show, versus jumping in and saying, okay, I'm going to take over here now, which is our habit. And so one of the key elements to making that happen is what we call the generative container. Well, the generative container is really, this is kind of the secret sauce, if you will, of this whole approach. But it's not only a space like a room or a conference room or whatever. It is an emotional space as well, whereby it's secure and whereby communication is welcomed and is safe. And if your people can say that they feel it is safe to say whatever, whether it's off the wall or whether it's conflictual, then you can begin to get to the heart of what we're talking about in terms of this vision. It's an environment which also creates an opportunity for self-organization, which basically means that we can put people in a room. If anybody's familiar with the terms of future search or open space technology, or some of the ones where people are brought together and left to self-organize around the topics. If the question is, what are we going to do next? And maybe that's the purpose, is what kind of different parts of do next do I want to get into? And we self-organize around that and start to generate some innovations, and some thought is initiated. A key element that distinguishes this from pretty much any other meeting of idea generation is that this is a process of hosting, not facilitating. I've spent a lifetime facilitating meetings from, team building, strategy, whatever, and from a consultant standpoint, facilitating. We always know where we want to go with that. Hosting is holding this environment and welcoming people in, and so that those thoughts, emotions, and need have a safe place to surface. And it's a whole different experience. Some of you may know already that there's hosting workshops, how to host. That's what this is about. It's not facilitating, because the essence of what the host in this case, and the host is the leader, is holding this container, and the container being not only the space but also the emotional space to be able to become aware of and express those critical issues. To the extent that can happen, there's actually a palpable experience of what it means to be in a container. We've worked with a number of different organizations, and I can think of one not long ago, actually, Anissa, one that you're familiar with, in which getting a group of people together who typically brought a whole lot of conflict into the room and diverse silos and all kinds of different things, because we were able to hold the container for them to have a safe and secure space, they began to say things to each other that they'd never said before, and start to look at ideas and ways through their complexity that they had never voiced before. And so it was an invitation, but the holding of the container really is I have to say, it's kind of the magic in this. And it's what also takes time to understand and really feel comfortable with. But I've done it in a number of different situations with strategic planning, bringing in stakeholders, staff, board members, founders, et cetera, so that they say, we've never experienced anything like this, and it's dramatic. So
I have a question for you guys.
Sure.
In normal times, there would be a process by which you could support your leaders in moving from traditional or command and control into a more generative approach. We don't have that luxury today. So I'm assuming there's got to be some other kind of trim tab or methodology where leaders can, or HR folks can bring these concepts into their team and have them begin behaving in a way holding the container for a safe space, or inviting folks to self-organize around the organizational problems. How would you direct someone to, this isn't something that they can put off until after the epidemic, right? This is something that we kind of need to begin now, even if we don't have the full picture of how to implement it. What are your suggestions?
Jill knows the answer to that.
Well, I think, becoming the person who can hold this container is the journey of a lifetime. So in situations like this one, I think I would surmise is that the people who have these capacities are your most, this is not a precise term, but they're the most like emotionally intelligent, with air quotes, people around. They're the ones who you already know you feel safe with. They're the ones who you probably had that breakdown about this major change in the adjustment it's been to your life, right? It's the person that you've had to, that has come to your rescue before. And what I'll say is, I think in these situations, people who have that skill set recognize they have it, and people naturally gravitate to them. It's part of the self-organizing process. That's my.
Yeah, I think that that makes perfect sense. My challenge from an HR perspective, or supporting, our peers in doing something now, is I think it started with what you first shared, right? Which is, it's about the behaviors. And if a leader doesn't automatically have these behaviors, or have already developed this emotional intelligence, I think what you're sharing is also that there's examples out there that we can point to. Just a couple of examples, and then you guys tell me if I'm tracking with what you're saying. We know of one company who the leadership team tragically have all contracted the coronavirus, but their employees, who are also hanging out with them, don't know that from them. They've heard it from the fact that they're not showing up, they're not telling anyone anything, they don't want anyone else to stop working. Whole breakdown in trust, among other just terrible ideas, right? We have another company who, from the beginning of March, have been, even before the government said anything, they're like, hey guys, if this happens, we need to be prepared. So here's what we're doing. And they've done that every single day. They are furloughing and laying off employees. They have employees who are like, we're showing up anyway because my buddy is still working here. I'm putting on the hazmat to keep cleaning. They're not getting paid for that. But those are the differences. Is that kind of the behaviors we're talking about here?
I mean, I'll say I think it's certainly in the right direction. The capacity for those leaders to be transparent, vulnerable, and face whatever the issue is head on certainly indicates the skills, behaviors, and capacities that we're pointing to here.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think so. And I mean, it's complicated, of course, by the new distancing. And I mean, the ideal is this is the experience people do in proximity. And so I think we need to figure out how to manage the whole Zoom, experience here more effectively. And I don't think we're there yet. But absolutely, there needs to be understanding what that sensitivity, what that emotional availability is to make this work in this time.
Environment. Thank you.
But great question. And I think that's what we're focused on too, Anissa, is how do we make this notion really available and applicable right now in terms of, given the difficulties in proximity.
Great.
So we want to put all this together, and Jill, you want to lead off with this?
Yeah, so, we've really kind of talked about a lot of the key ingredients, and I'm just going to go quickly through the process, which I think we've, as you're pointing to, Anissa, we've already started to see out happening in the world in different companies and folks approaching the challenge in a different way. So first step, identify the VUCA challenge, the adaptive challenge that's here, which really everybody is like, okay, the challenge is, what do we do now? What's our new normal? The next step is to to reframe it into some sort of a purpose that people can kind of get behind. And this is different than identifying a problem, as John said. This is more about asking yourself what you're going to create, like what matters right now, given your skills, given your assets, given your values. What can we do now? And, you know, Anissa, you pointed to a couple of different examples that people have chosen, like showing up for work anyway, right? There's a purpose there that those folks are galvanized by that really just turns the whole thing on its head, right? And you can tell they see the situation differently because they're showing up differently.
And I mean, just in terms of what you're doing, Anissa, I mean, moving from the solving the day-to-day problems of getting people aligned, consultants aligned with your clients, you've seen a new purpose here in terms of what you're doing with this outreach. Purpose, how do we give back? How do we help people organize their thinking around this complexity? This is exactly what you're doing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so the next step then is to really engage all the stakeholders. And one of the things that you probably want to pay attention to here is who the stakeholders are. So the engagement may look different depending on who they are, but it could be your employees, obviously, could be your customers, could be your vendors, could be your board members. And all of those stakeholders have different viewpoints of your organization and how it works and how it doesn't work and what matters to them. And those different viewpoints are really valuable in the process of recombining and becoming creative about what to do from here. It becomes a generative conversation in which there are new thoughts happening. And
you just mentioned, Jill, in terms of maybe adding in customers and suppliers. I mean, aren't they colleagues? Are not just competitors or, you know, people we use, but aren't they part of this conversation?
Yeah, I think it's a frequently overlooked part. And what's really interesting then is once you have all those people together and you're having this generative conversation, you know, about who is it that we're going to become? What are we going to do now? What matters to us? What's our purpose, right? Is you start getting some ideas in the room and people begin to self-organize. They begin to galvanize themselves around the different parts of the business. And so some people are like, you know, we really got to maintain the supply chain, and they just go to work on that. And some people are like, you know what, we've got to maintain the workforce because our people need to have health insurance. We refuse to lay them off. We're not going to do that. Some people galvanize around that, making sure that the workforce is well cared for. You know, other folks galvanize around, well, our product, you know, is not in any demand, but we still have all these supplies. What else can we do with it? And they start innovating and coming up with a new way to go to market in this time. So the self-organizing part is just really, I think we're seeing a lot of it out in society with mask making and whatnot, which has been really fun, and, you know, putting together PPE. So there's some really fun things that can come out of that.
And one of the things that we'll talk about in a minute is in this moment of self-organization and that generative conversations is we want to introduce some, if you will, some disruptive thinking, because we don't want to keep going down the same path of, yeah, let's figure it out based on what we know and what we don't know and the old method. But how do we throw in something as we call generative images, which really disrupt our thinking, stop our thought? It's something like this. Yeah, how do we manage strategic instability? What does that mean? It seems so foreign, and it stops us until we think about maybe what that means.
Yeah, and John keeps pointing to, like, the key piece of this is you're seeing things differently. You know, and we all know we've had moments like that in our life. And when we see the world differently, different opportunities show up for us. So we act newly, we create newly. We now have these innovations. Okay. So we have these innovations and probes that people have come up with fresh ideas, and we're going to just test them out, right? We're going to just try it and see what happens. And we're going to bring back the learning to figure out which one of those things, if any of them work, or to keep testing and trying until we find something that we can scale up, because that's where we can get our wins and continue to move forward.
So this is really how it all comes together in the model. And again, I give great credit to Jarvis Bush in terms of how he's put this together, Model for Generative Change. He's writing a book on this as well. So this is, again, a snapshot of that. And the question is then, what's the preparedness? How do we get ready to get into that particular process? Well, I tell you, the first thing, and Jill's already mentioned this, is know your audience. Know your audience. What, who are your troops that are ready to move into this, and how ready are they to move into this? And, you know, what kind of preparation might they need to understand that? Because what you want to do is, in terms of your understanding of the dynamics of that container, safe space, chance to surface ideas and emotions and maybe conflict. And that's certainly welcomed, because maybe out of that conflict, the grist, the flint and the steel, is new ideas perk up. We get, you know, sparks of ideas and enthusiasm. And, but it's important as we get into this that we really communicate the process. Last thing we want to do is get people into a room and say, oh, by the way, here's what we're going to do. It's a process of bringing them on board around that, and communicating some of these steps and this new and a mindset that helps them not feel anxious about you saying, as the leader, I don't have the answer. And that makes some people really anxious. Oh my God. But the good news is that it's us, not just a top-down process. As I said, the real essence, secret sauce, if you will, is in how that container is managed and held and hosted, because that can make a significant difference. Are we losing you, Anissa, or are you on board, still with us?
I'm still with you, and I've got a really great question that has come in.
Okay.
One of our attendees writes, I like John's comment about creating a generative container, and Jill's comment about not brainstorming, but being an emergent edge, generating new thoughts. And I just ditto. Perfectly said. As one is hosting such a conversation, how do you achieve such measure of, some measure of closure? And I'm assuming that also means action items, who's going to do what, what now on one or more issues, without actively facilitating or without having the group fall off the edge, so to speak.
Yeah, it is. It's a delicate process. It's not magic, but and there's training to get to that point. But in many cases, it's observing and watching and listening and noting what's happening. And rather than driving to a particular conclusion, it's noting maybe the tension that's in the room and maybe reflecting that back. Again, there are techniques for that whole area of hosting, which we recommend. There's a great methodology called World Cafe, which I'd recommend. You can Google that, and it's a wonderful way of just doing that, hosting in a setting where lots of different conversations are going on, innovation is happening, and doing it in a way that is both gentle and purposeful, in that we want to see what can kind of come out of this. But it is dexterity. Jill has got the answer.
I like how John thinks I have the answer. No, but what I think the questioner is pointing to here is, it is, again, Yes, Bettina, he did say World Cafe. Is that the process of self-organizing and the generative image that you've created are going to guide that decision, and your group that has self-organized around a particular topic is maybe the old way of decision making will work for you here, where it's, you know, you can tell who to defer to by who's in the group. Maybe the decision making actually emerges there too, to say, wow, gosh, you know, the people who you would normally defer to actually are very welcoming of this process, and they actually are like, well, my power goes behind this person's suggestion, right? And this is the process of experimentation. It's adaptation to the environment. It's trying to walk on a rocking boat, you know. It's a constant moving thing, but when you put your foot on it, you know where you're going. You feel that ground underneath you. So it's emergent, and you can ask the questions John's pointing to move people to that action point of what is it that we are going to probe.
That's very good. I think,
go ahead.
now, just real quick, I do think that you guys are also saying that it is a facilitated process, and a person doesn't have to have all the answers to begin this. But if the goal is to be innovative as a group and to listen to the stakeholders and to generate innovations and solutions to this very complex time, then there's going to be some transparency and some stumbling and some inaccuracies as we bump along. But there are methods of facilitating transparency. There are methods of holding that container, a safe space. And you know, if someone is going to do this tomorrow, look up the World Cafe, look up level 10 meetings. Those are also good tools. And also look up just a simple 5-step problem solving process. That 5-step problem solving process is exactly what you're talking about, holding the space for what's the problem, what's all the information we have right now, what are possible solutions, how do we evaluate those solutions, and how do we put it into action. So you guys are sharing a larger concept that organizations can use to frankly survive way beyond where we are, and adapt, but also on a that's a macro level. On that micro level, something that leaders can start right now, which is holding that space and fostering solutions from within their team and their greater organization.
Yeah, and in addition, I mean, you reflected on World Cafe. I would totally recommend the book, which is called The World Cafe by Juanita Brown. It's a classic. It's a classic. And in it, there's a wonderful chapter on hosting.
Perfect.
and questioning and the generative questions. I think it's even titled Generative Questions. So highly recommend that. And that is a good kind of a primer on this process. So
John, you want to wrap it up with the generative images, and then because I think we're getting close on time here, so I just want to make sure that we get.
Yeah, and I notice you're getting a lot of chats there too. We can let me go through this, and we can come back to that. I'm glad that's stimulating some questions. So generative images, this is this combination of word that's disruptive. And how does it? We want a question or a thought to be able to kind of stop an answer. Somebody doesn't have a quick answer. And it could be something like, what does strategic instability mean to us? Predictive disruption, you know, environmental. We've heard all kinds of intelligence, environmental intelligence. What does that mean? There was one client of ours a client of Gervais, used the term aqueduct to show how silos could support a flow through. Generative questions also. You know, what is our conversation as an organization? Do you have a conversation as an organization? Our feeling is organizations are more like conversations than they are like structures. And that's a generative thought. If you were thinking of your organization as a conversation, what would it be? What could it be? What is work? Right now, we're asking that question. What is, not just what is our work, but what is work? What could it be? How are we positioned to to look at that. If we could design the world after COVID-19, what would that be? The world, and not just our work. If we could design the world, so these are the kinds of questions take us into a different depth as opposed to just, what are we going to do next? And that's the intent, is how does it stimulate that depth of thought? So just as a relook at that model, this is the process, and all of the things that we've been mentioning thus far are part of how this unfolds. Again, this is like a 5-day workshop, but we want to give you that overview. And Jill, I think you're up on the next piece. Anissa, did you have your mouth open?
Yeah, we do have one question that came in, and I think this one you'll be able to answer pretty quickly. Becoming the person to hold the container. Can a traditional leader learn the skills to be generative leaders, or are these generative leaders fundamentally different in their values and beliefs?
I think there's a range of answers to that, and Jill, hop in here. I think Jill mentioned emotional intelligence. I think it's certainly part of it. I would hope that every leader could learn to do this, and it's another dimension of our leadership, cabinet or bookshelf. It's at both and but this is not easy. This is not just another hammer or another screwdriver. This is a new mindset, and it's a growth mindset. And sometimes in our traditional, we operating on a fixed mindset. We know where to go. This is a open and a growth mindset, and there are lots of resources on that. Jill, what would you add to that?
Yeah, I'll just add one thing. Yeah, I think anybody can become this. It's part of the human development, process. And I think there's a great catalyst at work here with this situation. It is a catalyst. People are reevaluating their values and beliefs. And it does require a shift in those categories to develop as a human. So it's happening right now. People are moving more that direction because they kind of have to.
And I'll just say that, and we're going to invite people to get in touch with us and ask additional questions. But I mean, there is a real direction in terms of this development of the generative leader that that embraces some theories. In terms of ego stage development. What does that mean? This is some theoretical underpinnings, but and this fair amount of anxiety that's brought forward. How do we manage anxiety as leaders? I mean, so there's some issues. I don't want to get in too many weeds here, but
it takes something, and we'll help. So as we've kind of mentioned, these are some of the caveats of this process. Is that you don't want to try to go from kindergarten to 12th grade overnight. It's just not going to work. So it's not for everybody. It's for people who primarily already have that growth mindset, that open, that quality of openness, that very collaborative way of working. It's going to be natural for them.
And just as a caveat to what I just said, there may be some who this is a bridge too far, and that's not what they want to do. And as we look at our organizations, there may be someone else in the organization that does have that. Maybe it's the VP of HR, the HR director. Maybe it's your, internal organization consultant. But so it may be that there are other leaders in the organization.
Yeah, it's not for every issue. The model that you pointed to, Anissa, for problem solving, if that's the easiest and most available way to solve a problem that has a key pinpointed thing that you can say, yes, the problem is this part is broken. Okay, great. This is not that. It's not for the emergency because of that exact reason. In an emergency, you need to know, what is the part? I can fix that part right now. Where we're operating is in the sort of multi-layered, interdependent problems that impact problems area. So for that reason, it is not for the faint of heart and for people who need to have an answer. I wanted to just say one other thing about the generative image. You know, it's kind of funny because it's kind of like a Zen koan, right? It's an unsolvable riddle. And that's kind of the point, because your brain will operate differently. The disruption that John's been pointing to. That's where we want to get into. It's a less linear process and a more sort of playful, inquiry-based process. So, you know, when I wanted to just give one example too, like when we first, I wasn't alive, I'm sorry, but when we first took on this process of putting a man on the moon, it's like, wait, what? You're gonna put a man on the moon? Wait, no, wait. And that's the point. Mm-hmm. That's the point, because when you're in those places where your brain cannot do the same old pathways, you get access to some of your deeper strengths, assets, and ingenuity. Yeah, so I think that's all I wanted to say there. And I think our next slide, John.
Yeah, this is our offers.
Yeah, so obviously this is a nuanced approach, right? And so for the turnkey audience, we are offering a 1-hour consultation on this process. So if you have specific questions about how to use this process in your organization, we are very happy to talk through those specifics with you, to identify the leaders that you can put to use who have the skills for this, and guide you in that process. So we're offering that consultation, and we'll do 2 of them actually. We're also offering a consultation for the management team to have a conversation with us about what is your organizational conversation. All the bits of conversation that are happening make up your organization and who you are and how you behave and what your culture is and how that translates into the world. And right now, the conversation that you want to be having is one of, I'm showing up for my coworkers. We're innovating, not those other less empowered, divisive kinds of conversations. So we are happy to have a consultation for you in that regard as well.
And this is very much part and parcel of organizational culture, but sometimes an organization can be trying to figure out what that is. Well, the message is, believe it or not, your organization is having a conversation right now. That conversation is going on. The question is, as the leadership, do you know what it is? Do you know what the conversation is? Do you want to know what it is? And how can you be part of it? How can you welcome that conversation to be much more open, so that it's not just a crucial time to have that, but it's the ongoing process. All right, so you can reach us at, and Anissa, I'm sure this is on our page, our speakers page, but feel free to contact us to take advantage of these offers. We'd be happy to do that, or have any other chat with you about where we might be of service. And that's what we're in this together with Turnkey. We want to be of service to our broader community. I can't hear you.
You're muted.
I had to mute myself because my cat is in the corner of the room. Like so many of the videos that you're seeing these days, she's just crying to get out. So I just wanted to say thank you guys. This has been very enlightening and really helpful. And you guys can see my screen now.
Mm-hmm, yep.
Just wanted to say thank you everyone for joining us. Do reach out to John and Jill. They've generously offered to support organizations, so take them up on that. Come back to the Leading in a Crisis Summit. Check out our other talks happening every Wednesday and Thursday throughout April and into May. And if Turnkey can be of service, it would be my honor and my privilege. Don't hesitate to give us a call at 281-469-4244 or shoot me an email at leader@turnkeycoachingsolutions.com. John, Jill, I can't wait to talk to you more about this. This was fantastic.
Thank you so much, Anissa.
You had a lot of chats, Anissa, and I'm sorry I didn't click on them to to answer, but if anybody wants to send them further to us, please,
Will do.
please do.
I
Answer.
managed a lot of them, so we're good.
Good. All
No.
right.
Thank you, everyone. Have a fantastic day. Stay safe and
Thanks so
healthy.
much. It's our pleasure.